All right, Deuteronomy 2. Chris, fix it. I know, right? That's not helpful. That is the last slide. So I don't know why this is being as weird as it is. Let's try that. There we go. Okay, so last time we talked about a few things. Deuteronomy means second law. It does not mean law point 2 or 2.0. Instead, it is the law again. So another retelling of the law. It takes place in the plains of Moab. We talked about all of the possible dates. I'm not talking about it again. Nobody knows. Do what the Bible says it is. There you go. It is one of the most quoted books in the New Testament, 60 times, the vast majority of which are direct quotes. But as we talked about last time, there's also a lot of allusions to it. Deuteronomy 1 has the idea of the judges, which is very similar to how Paul describes when Christians are upset with each other. Don't go to the courts, you go to yourselves. Very similar writing on that. So even the allusions to it are all over the place. I think only Isaiah is higher as far as being directly quoted in the New Testament with 65 times. But people debate that, which means Deuteronomy is not debated. That one's pretty clear. The Isaiah one's a little debated, so many people will say Deuteronomy is the most quoted. However, amongst Christians, it's not the most quoted, nor the most sought after, nor is it even the one that people know how to pronounce. So all of those things means that I'm teaching it. Last time we talked about the suzerain vassal treaty. We talked a little bit about it. I'm only revisiting it because the format of Deuteronomy follows it. So during this time, this is how they would have written a formal treaty between a higher power and a lower power. Starts with a preamble, moves into the history, moves into stipulations, moves into witnesses, moves into sanctions. So we start with the preamble, who are the main players. Moses moves into the history of the relationship between the greater and the lesser, moves into what are the responsibilities of the lesser in order for the treaty to continue going forward. What are the responsibilities of the greater in order for the treaty to continue going forward? Adds witnesses. Moses' witnesses are pretty much themselves and God. In the Hittites or Assyrians, they would have added a lot of gods as being witnesses, but Moses doesn't, for fairly obvious reasons. And then sanctions. What will happen if one or both parties breaks this treaty? Obviously, God does not, so there's not a lot on what's going to happen to God if he doesn't hold up his end of the bargain, but he does address it, and we'll talk about that in a couple of months. All right, last time we talked about chapter 1, the introduction to the world. So God gave them instructions. Leave this mountain. You've been here long enough. Go up and take the land. They immediately go up. On the way, Moses realizes, I can't keep control of these people. It's been like a year. And they establish the judges. These judges are supposed to be men who are wise and experienced and will make right decisions, utilizing God's judgment. Then we moved into Israel's fear. Israel gets there. They're like, I don't really want to go in there. I don't know what it is. And so they send spies in, which only increases the fear. Though if you notice, the spies say it's a good land. They just also say, we'll never get to live there. But they don't deny the fact that God brought them to a good land. And then ultimately, God says, all right, we're done with you. Your children you were so afraid of being taken from you, they're the ones that are going to conquer the land. You're all going to die. Israel said, oh no, and ran up there like the wonderful children that they are, and said, I'm going to obey now, and were soundly defeated. That's where we're at today. I put our map back up here just so that we can remind ourselves. We are up here in the valley of Moab. That's where Moses is, but not necessarily where the history we're talking about is. History we're talking about is they came from Mount Sinai. They went all the way up there. You guys remember how many days it took? 11. So he says 11 days. We left here, we got to there. 11 days. So they stay about a year, plus or minus, in Mount Sinai region, getting the tabernacle in order. 11 days, they rush up here. They could have gone straight in. We would have called this an incredibly fast exodus. Instead, we add the wandering years. And my favorite is, I think we're even going to talk about it in chapter 2. In chapter 2 and in verse 1, then we turned and we journeyed in the wilderness in the direction of the Red Sea, as the Lord told me, and for many days we traveled around Mount Seir. Moses is funny, because when he says, and for many days we traveled around Mount Seir, what he means is for the next 40 years we traveled around Mount Seir. But he doesn't say that. He says for many days. And so that's why you got all these moving around, circly, weird stuffs going on. So ultimately, they're going to wind up down here near Ezion-Geber and Elith. And then they're going to charge their way right up into that eastern side. But I like how Moses says it. Just a few days. I mean, okay, many days, but. All right, any comments on chapter 1 before we start talking about chapter 2? Fantastic. So my goal today is chapter 2 and chapter 3. We're going to look at some extra biblical things, but primarily I want to talk about what they did, how it's moving, understanding the text as it is written. We are going to get to read most of it, so I know sometimes we're not going to be able to. You guys saw my schedule, but today I think we still can. Moses says, chapter 2, verse 1, "Then we turned and journeyed into the wilderness in the direction of the Red Sea, as the Lord told me. And for many days we traveled around Mount Seir. Then the Lord said to me, you've been traveling around this mountain country long enough." I like this too. When God said over there in chapter 1 that it's time to leave Mount Sinai and go up, that's literally what he said in verse 6. "You have stayed long enough at this mountain." We're done. Here he says it again. God says, "You've been traveling around this mountain long enough. What are you doing?" I like that little tongue-in-cheek. Moses is fun. "Turn northward and command the people. You are about to pass through the territory of your brothers, the people of Esau, who live in Seir. They will be afraid of you, so be very careful. Do not contend with them, for I will not give you any of their land. No, not so much as for the sole of the foot to tread on, because I have given Mount Seir to Esau as a possession. You shall purchase food from them with money that you may eat, and you shall buy water from them with money that you may drink. For the Lord your God has blessed you in all the work of your hands. He knows you're going through this. He knows you're going through this great wilderness. These 40 years the Lord your God has been with you. You've lacked nothing. So we went on away from our brothers, the people of Esau, who live in Seir, away from the Arabah road, from Eleth to Ezion-Geber, or Geber. I don't know what I'm going to say in a minute. So I called this section Esau. Notice I used a lot of people's names, because that's really what we're dealing with, is as God is taking them to the land given to Abraham, he is walking them through other people's lands. The first land, Deuteronomy points out to us, is Esau's. Esau gets the land down here, the land of Edom. I think I got a bigger map. You can see it down there as well. So it is called the land around Mount Seir. You can see Edom and Seir right there. Notice how God is very careful. He tells them they will be afraid of you, so be very careful. I will not give you this land. This is probably a pretty smart thing to say, right? I mean, the last time that they approached the promised land, the people said, "Oh, we did something wrong, so now we're going to rush in and do whatever we feel like." So God's very clear. You will not get this land. And in fact, Israel never really takes this land. They, for a while, get the Negeb. Lasts for a couple of generations. The Judah kind of keeps it, but honestly, not really. Over here, David has a lot of wars that go on there. Solomon controls Moab for a little while, but never really getting all the way down here to Edom. Solomon's peak goes to, there's a wadi over here, the river of Egypt, and they control here, but never really down into that region. So God never gives it to his people. All right, and in verse 8, we're noticing they start off in Eleth, Ezion-Geber, and they go up the King's Road, up into the land. Any questions anybody got? Any thoughts? Cool. It's geography. I'm very excited. Okay, next section I called Lot. Lot part 1, then we got Lot part 2. So, God gave to Esau. What is the Israelite counterpart to Esau? Jacob. If somebody had said Israel, I would have been so proud of you, because he gets renamed, right? Jacob. What's the Israelite counterpart to Lot? Abraham. Fantastic. So, verse 9. We turned and we went in, well, the end of verse 8. We turned and we went in the direction of the wilderness of Moab. The Lord said to me, do not harass Moab or contend with them in battle, for I will not give you any of their land for a possession, because I have given Ar to the people of Lot for a possession. And then we get an interjection. Remember, these books were compiled, and the people who compiled them did a little bit of explaining at times. We even see it in the New Testament a couple of times. So we get this interjection here from verse 10 all the way down through probably verse 12. We're going to get another interjection in the next section because there's a lot of extra comments about what's going on with Lot's region. So for a moment, we're going to skip it. Drop down with me to verse 13. He says, now rise up and go over the brook Zered, for we went over the brook Zered, and the time from our leaving Kadesh Barnea until we crossed the brook Zered was 38 years, until the entire generation, that is the men of war, had perished from the camp, as the Lord had sworn to them. For indeed the hand of the Lord was against them to destroy them from the camp until they had perished. What month? Do you guys remember all the way back to chapter 1? What month are we in? It's okay to look if you don't remember, because I'm going to look. We are in the 11th month of the what year? 40th year. So how long does it take them to conquer this entire side and then make it back down here to be ready in the plains of Moab to be ready to go over across to Jordan? 2 years. You're close. So, from the point that they are, let me see, I'm going to use this map. They're right here at Kadesh Barnea. They try to go up. Nope, can't go up. God destroys them from that. They wander, and they end up down here. Then they charge up to this region. When they charge up to this region is what we're talking about in verse 14. From the time that we left Kadesh Barnea until the time that we crossed the brook Zered. So right there. I knew it was on this map. 38 years right here. From the time they cross the brook Zered until they conquer all of that, less than 2 years. They're moving. Arguably, they do most of the conquering actually in about a year. They do an establishment for about a year, give or take a few months. All right, any comments, any thoughts? Cool. All right, let's go back and talk about the interjection then. So God says, you can't have the land of Moab. Let me tell you about the land of Moab. So whoever did the compiling, whether it's Moses who wrote the interjection or somebody else that was trying to help other people understand the interjection, we have no idea. In verse 10 it says that the Emim formerly lived there, a people great and many and as tall as the Anakim. Okay, let's take it one step at a time. Who are the Anakim? They're giants. They're the ones we're afraid of. You guys remember what I said Anak means? Neck. In Egyptian images, they have large chains around their neck with the disc of the god Ra, and they would call and ask for rain, and Ra would give them rain. So the Anakim probably are a title rather than a race for a kind of person. So the Emim are like them, but are different. They're a separate one. They are like the Anakim in verse 11. They also counted as Rephaim, but the Moabites called them Emim. So Rephaim, that's a term we see a lot. It's probably a title. It may be a description. It means terrible people. So it's very similar to how we no longer know what the European word for bear was, because the word that we have means brown. We lost that word because they thought if you said that word, a bear would come and eat you. So they stopped saying his name. Well, this is probably the same idea. Very similar to how the Grecians came over and settled in Philistia, but Egypt calls them sea peoples. Never uses their name, probably for very similar reasons. So these Emim count among the terrible people in verse 11, and the Moabites called them Emim. Why they called them Emim, we don't know. The Horites also lived in Seir formerly, but the people of Esau dispossessed them and destroyed them from before them and settled in their place as Israel did to the land of their possession, which the Lord gave to them. So one of the great arguments for this is interjected a little bit later is he isn't giving it to them yet. But Moses also could have written that because Moses always talks as if they already own the land. But anyways, so the Horites were there for a little while, but the people of Esau have dispossessed it. Notice this interjection. We're talking about right to the land. If Israel has a right to its land because it came in and killed the people who were there before, then Esau has to have the same right, God-given right. Same pattern that is going on here. I think it's also worth noting, God promised this land to Esau. Terrible people lived there who were giants. Esau lives in the land. What do you think that would mean for Israel as they're about to start conquering? Yeah. We scouted the land. There's giants. There's powerful people here. But Esau is currently living in the land that was formerly owned by giants. Okay, that worked. Blaine?
It's a further condemnation of the cowards that wouldn't go in when God told them to as well.
Yes. Yes, I was hoping you were going to say it. Yes. Fantastic. Everybody heard Blaine, right? Because it was really good. So, Jacob I loved, Esau I hated. Esau I hated, took their land. Jacob I loved, didn't. It's a great parallel. And again, that's why I really like Moses. So whether that's an interjection here of Moses or it's an interjection of somebody later, it's still very Moses. Just thumbing him the whole time, flicking him in the nose. Okay. Any comments anybody has on that section? All right, verse 16. So as soon as all the men of war had perished, I have this mental image. Do you guys have that mental image of Moses and all of the people standing over this old man on a deathbed just waiting? All right, he breathed his last, we can go. Because that's always how it's worded. When the last of them died, when all of the men of war have perished, then we can go and do all of these things. You got to wonder how that last guy felt. I am holding them out of the land. And I've lived a long time and I keep on living. My clothes don't wear out, my shoes don't wear out, I'm well fed. I just keep living. Just wonder. I also wonder, because God told him at the beginning it's going to be 40 years. We're only at year 38. So they may have thought, hey, I got 2 more years. Bam, God takes them out first. I don't know. Or somebody helped them. Ooh, that's really biblical. Nation of Israel is going to like that one later. Reminds me of, never mind. Verse 16, as soon as all of the men of war had perished and were dead from among the people, the Lord said to me, today you are to cross the border of Moab at Ar. When you approach the territory of the people of Ammon, do not harass them. Do not harass them or contend with them, for I will not give you any of the land of the people of Ammon as a possession, because I have given it to the sons of Lot for a possession. We have another interjection from verse 20 down to verse 24, so drop to verse 24. Rise up, set out on your journey, and go over the valley of the Arnon. Behold, I have given into your hand Sihon the Amorite, king of Heshbon, and his land. Begin to take possession and contend with him in battle. This day I will begin to put the dread and fear of you on the peoples who are under the whole heaven. who shall hear the report of you and shall tremble and be in anguish because of you. Okay, so let's talk about the non-interjection point, and then we'll go back to the interjection. So finally, everybody's dead, and God says you're going to cross the border of Moab at Ar. So we are down here. Ar is somewhere right about in there. So we are about to cross the Arnon and go into the next region. So I got a bigger map. So we are right here now. So this section right here, Dead Sea's right there. Now, big Dead Sea. So we are right down here about to cross over the border of Arnon. So we're going out of Moab, land given to who? Esau. And we're moving into land that was given to, well, Moab was Lot. Land given to second Lot. Okay. But then God says, you don't get this one either. I've given it to Lot. I can't give it to you. If you try to take any portion of it, I'm going to fight against you and you're not going to get it. So they have to walk through again. They have to buy their own food. They have to buy their water. They have to pay land rights. They have to do all of that kind of stuff and walk through this land because they're not going to get it. As I mentioned a moment ago, David does war some down here. Not a lot. But he's got some wars down in that region. Moab and Ammon trade back and forth for a little while. So there's some of that going on, but they never fully hold it. David does for a couple of years, then they lose it. Solomon has it for a while. His son loses it because it's not really theirs. It belongs to Moab and it belongs to Ammon. So that's the region we're at, going up into Ammon's region. When he gets up in there, in verse 24, he says, you're about to go into a land I'm going to give to you. Sihon, the Amorite in Heshbon. Heshbon begins to mark that border of what's going to be Sihon's range, and then up here into Og's range here in just a minute. But you don't get these little parts right down here. They're not yours. Any comments anybody has before we talk about the interjection? Cool. If you want to know more about all of these kind of things, I recommend the book of Numbers. We're not going to talk about that because Deuteronomy has enough. So let's go back to verse 20. It says, this land that we're talking about, the land given to Lot, the people of Ammon, it is also counted as a land of Rephaim. Rephaim means what? Terrible people. So this is again that nameless awfulness that occurred previously. Rephaim formerly lived here, but the people of Ammon call them Zamzummim. I love the ancient world. And we do it today, but we try to be more politically correct, and so we try not to make fun of other people. But like how Rome called them barbarians because their language sounded like bar, 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 right? I think maybe Greece actually started that. But anyways, the idea here is that when you say Zamzmum in a language they would have used, it sounds like a buzzing. And so the words literally mean buzz, 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 buzz in Hebrew and Ammonite and all of those languages over there. I love that. Because we're not just done there, but where the Avim are going to come in here in a moment. The Zuzim are also in there. We have no idea what language that was. You're welcome to speculate if you want. I'm not going to because this is going on the internet. But the buzz, 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 buzz people, I like that. So we get another detail of these terrible people. They got a lot of buzzing sounds in their language. They were a great people, verse 21, and many and as tall as the Anakim. But the Lord destroyed them before the Ammonites. They dispossessed them, settled in their place, as he did for the people of Esau who live in Seir when he destroyed the Horites before them, and they dispossessed them and settled in their place even to this day. Draw the same conclusion. Blaine said it really good. The lesser people, Lot picked wrong. Lot is sinful. God gave him the land, took it from the terrible people, took it from the giants, took these fortified cities away from them, gave it to these people that the Israelites are currently looking down their nose at. Israel wanders 38 years until they all die, before finally they get to go in and take their land. And then in verse 23 he says, as for the Avim, who live in the villages as far as Gaza, the Caphtorim, who came from Caphtor, destroyed them and settled in their place. So the Avim we have over here seems to still be related. You can hear it in the word zimzimim, Avim, Zuzim. So you can still hear it in the words. They were destroyed by the Caphtorim, people who came from Caphtor. Where's Caphtor? Anybody want to take a guess? Now, use your ancient language knowledge. If there is a letter that you're going to understand that the other people say, it's the first one. And then they're going to say a bunch of gibberish that follows afterwards. So they probably come from a K place, because Caphtor. So the thought is that they come from Cyprus, which we say Cyprus, they would have said Cyprus, or Crete, which would make them closer in nationality to Greeks. So this is probably the origin of Philistines, sea peoples that are coming in. They came in, destroyed the Avim, and drove them out. Any questions, any thoughts? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. You're exactly right. Yeah, we get that from the Roman Empire. Because, yeah, nothing good comes out of Crete. It's like Nazareth. Yeah. All right. If you want to know a little bit more about the conquering time, Genesis chapter 14 is a great place to look. Genesis chapter 14 is when a bunch of people all get together and decide to war against everybody, and poor Lot gets taken captive. Abraham has to come along with his 70 guys and destroy a conglomeration of 5 kings, and then ultimately rescues Lot. And Melchizedek comes in that chapter. So that's that same event we're talking about, this driving out of the Horites, driving out of these Zamzumim, the people of Rephaim. That's the same time period, Genesis 14. All right, any thoughts before we go a little further? Cool. You guys with me? There's a lot of words tonight, right? And none of them are normal. I'm trying to be upbeat because we're all tired. Okay, God then says, I'm going to give the land of Sihon to you, who's the king of Heshbon. You're going to cross over, and I am going to put the dread and fear of you on all of them. Moses, in verse 26, does the most non-dread, non-fear thing he could do. I love it. So I sent messengers into the wilderness of Kedemoth to Sihon, the king of Heshbon, with words of peace, saying, let me pass through your land. I'll go only by the road. I will turn aside neither to the right nor to the left. You shall sell me food for money, that I may eat, sell me water for money, that I may drink. Only let me pass by on foot, as the sons of Esau who live in Seir, and the Moabites who live in Ar did for me, until I go over the Jordan into the land that the Lord our God is giving to us. That is the least threatening thing you could have said, right? It's probably been a couple of months, weeks at minimum. They've been traveling, coming from the Red Sea down there at Ezion, Geber, and Eleth. They've been traveling up through here. They kill nobody. They kill nobody. They get up here, and God says, you're going to kill everybody. And so they say, we come in peace. Sihon's the idiot, but Moses credits God. It says in verse 30, but Sihon, the king of Heshbon, would not let us pass by him, for the Lord your God hardened his spirit and made his heart obstinate, that he might give him into your hand as he is this day. Who else can you remember that God hardened his heart? Pharaoh. Which again, yes, the credit's given to God. Pharaoh's a dumb guy. Like literal fires falling from the sky, and I'm going to be like, no, you can't go. Like, you got to be arrogant. And he was. Sihon's the same way. God hardens him and says, no, we ain't letting these people walk through. We're going to fight them. And so, in verse 31, It says, "And the Lord said to me, Behold, I have begun to give Sihon and his land over to you. Begin to take possession, that you may occupy his land." Then Sihon came out against us, he and all of his people, to battle at Jahaz. And the Lord our God gave him over to us. We defeated him and his sons and all of his people. We captured all of his cities at that time, and devoted to destruction every city, men, women, and children. We left no survivors. Only the livestock we took as spoil for ourselves, with the plunder of the cities that we captured. From Aroer, which is the edge of the valley of the Arnon, and from the city that is in the valley, as far as Gilead, there was not a city too high for us. The Lord our God gave all into our hands. Only the land of the sons of Ammon you did not draw near, that is, to all the banks of the river Jabbok, and the cities of the hill country, whatever the Lord our God had forbidden us. So, they move on up here, they cross the Arnon, they get up here to Heshbon, and they begin conquering. They're taking this region. Jabbok is our boundary. We're not taking things here. We're not taking things over here. We're just moving up. Okay? Y'all with me? Sihon destroyed. Chapter 3. Any comments before chapter 3? Okay. Then we turned and went up to Bashan. And Og, the king of Bashan, came out against us, he and all his people, to battle at Edrei. The Lord said to me, "Do not fear him, for I have given him and all his people and his land into your hand. You shall do to him as you did to Sihon, the king of the Amorites, who lived at Heshbon." So the Lord our God gave into our hand Og also, the king of Bashan, and all of his people. We struck them down until they had no survivor left. We took all of his cities at that time. There was not a city we did not take from them. 60 cities. The whole region of the Argob, the kingdom of Og in Bashan. All these cities were fortified with high walls, gates, and bars, besides very many unwalled villages. And we devoted them to destruction as we did to Sihon, the king of Heshbon, devoting to destruction every city, men, women, and children. But all the livestock and the spoils of the city we took as our plunder. So we took the land at that time out of the hand of the 2 kings of the Amorites, who were beyond the Jordan, from the valley of the Arnon to Mount Hermon. The Sidonians call Hermon Syrian, while the Amorites call it Senir. All the cities of the tableland, all of Gilead, all of Bashan, as far as Salakah and Edrei, cities of the kingdom of Og in Bashan. Then we'll stop there. There's another interjection, and I don't want us to get distracted. So, we're moving up to the north now. We move into the land of Og. Not Oz, Og. So, Bashan's up here. Gilead is this region right here. We're going to go all the way up. Somewhere right about that line is Mount Hermon. Some will argue it's over here in the mountains of Lebanon region. Some argue it's over here. You're welcome to take it up with them. Most of the people who do that arguing are dead. So, you can figure it out yourself. So, now Israel owns everything from the Arnon all the way to Mount Hermon. They do not own Moab, they do not own Edom, and they do not own what is left for Ammon. Notice Rabbath Ammon over here, not owned. Okay, any questions anybody's got?
These are the conquests that Rahab mentioned in This scared everybody else.
Yeah, this happened last year. Last year, well, 2 years ago, you people moved through these lands peacefully. Last year, you took everything. Now you're at Jericho. It's very exciting. Yes, this is why they're afraid. We're not talking about long, extended periods. Do you know how long it took to take a fortified city in the ancient world at this time? It could be years. Because how do you take a city with walls? You starve them. We don't have catapults. We don't have trebuchets. At best, we have ladders. That's it. So they take it in approximately a year, maybe a year and a half. They take all of these. 60 fortified cities just in Og's land alone. That's not even including Sihon. Yeah, I'm going to be scared. I'm going to be scared. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
So you have, according to the Bible, hundreds of thousands of migrating.
Okay. You ask a really hard question. The reason it's really hard is because you have two schools of thought. You have people that believe the Bible is right and people that believe the Bible is wrong. If they believe that the Bible is right, then they're more accustomed and comfortable with large numbers of population. If you believe the Bible is wrong, they typically say, only if I have hard evidence do I prove that there are people who live there. So like they say in all of the land of Judah, there probably was only like 30,000 to 100,000 at their most. They field armies larger than that, according to the Bible. But the reason is because this is how much buildings we have seen. So population size is really hard. More than likely, we are looking at much smaller than what Israel is fielding. Israel is a mob. You've got, 600,000 fighting men when they left Egypt. Probably a comparable number at this point. I'm not getting into that. I think it's in the book of Numbers if you want to know. They are going to have much less because we're looking at more like Huns or, what's the other one? Attila the Hun and the other one. Anyways. Genghis, thank you. Genghis Khan. Coming through as an entire nation moving through. Whereas if you look at how China was fighting during the time of the Huns and Genghis Khan, they field an army and all of their people stay home, where they're going up against nations coming against them in battle. That's how Israel's fighting. Their children are over the hill, and all of the men have come over here. So 600,000 men is a pretty easy number for that, where probably if they acted like people of the land, they're probably more going to be 30,000, would probably be more realistic as an army. So if we're looking at 60 cities, just to take Og on its own, each city has between 1,000 and 30,000 people, based on archaeology. Of those, a small subset are actually going to be soldiers. So we're looking at maybe about 100 or so that are able to defend the city to 3,000. Just to give you rough ideas. The difficulty is not, can we kill them all? The difficulty and what makes this really impressive is that they do it so fast. How long does it take? Alexander the Great is one of the fastest to conquer Tyre, and I still think it took him, 10 years? It was a long time. Nebuchadnezzar conquers Tyre in 15 years. So when we talk about that as a typical siege, years. When they conquer Jerusalem, they come and build a siege wall. It takes longer than a year, and that's to build an entire wall to walk into the city. Yes?
It's also to be noted that they're descended from slaves.
Mm-hmm.
They would not have battle training.
Mm-mm.
And I doubt wandering around 40 years in the wilderness, or 38 at this point, would give them battle training.
No.
So the easiest way to conquer something is to run at it screaming, yelling, and throwing rocks, and that seems to work.
I mean, honestly, what is the old joke? How many fifth graders do you think you could take in a fight? At a certain point, it doesn't matter that they're fifth graders. There's enough of them, right? And they fight dirty. All right, any other thoughts? Good comments. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It is, yeah. A typical ancient world conquering like this would have meant we come into the land, we take everything that isn't in a walled, and we go home. At best, we took a city, maybe two a year. Not two massive conglomerations, two empires. No, that's not. Nobody does that. Anything else? Yeah. Yes. Yes. Interestingly, do you know how many times the Israelites have to deal with rebellions on this side of the river? from those people who lived there? None. However, they crossed Jericho, and there's a little nation that's here. There's nations right here. There's the Jebusites. David has to finish them off. We've got people over here, the Philistines. They couldn't drive them out. We've got them all up in here. They hardly even are able to conquer anything there, and they struggle with it for the rest of their existence. But that side, they were pretty zealous. They're pretty excited then. All right. You guys want to talk about the interjection? Verse 11. For only Og, the king of Bashan, was left with a remnant of the Rephaim. Ooh. Behold, his bed was bed of iron. Is it not in Rabbah of the Ammonites? 9 cubits was its length, 4 cubits its breadth, according to the common cubit. He was the last of the what? The terrible people. Now, those same terrible people that Edom destroyed and Moab destroyed and Ammon destroyed, those same terrible people? Yeah, same terrible people. So what have we done historically now? We came up to the land, said no, we're not going to do it, terrible people live there. Wander for 38 years until all the old people die. Then we come back up and we walk through the land that conquered, of the people who conquered terrible people. We walked through the land of the people who conquered terrible people. We walked through the Ammonite land right here of the people who conquered terrible people, and then we conquered terrible people. You can see an argument building, right? Moses is about to say, cross the Jordan and finish the job. Everybody else has done their part. Finish. Then you read the book of Joshua and Judges to know how they didn't do that. All right, any other thoughts? Yes.
Can I just go back to 2:12, the interjection there?
Yeah.
Because it says, Esau dispossessed them and destroyed them, as Israel did to the land of their inheritance which the Lord gave to them, but they didn't.
Right.
So,
They're still our Rephaim, right?
well, no, not that, but on the other side of the river, they did not destroy it, and that led to a bunch of problems. So,
It's
that puts more weight on Moses wrote that because he just assumed they were going to do what they were going.
That is fair. Moses does assume. Well, not when you get to the end of the book. But he assumes it at the beginning. At the end of the book, he no longer does.
He's still positive.
Yeah. Snarky, but positive. Okay, last part about that interjection I want to talk about is Og. It says, behold, his bed was a bed of iron. It is currently located at Rabbah of the Ammonites, 9 cubits its length, 4 cubits its breadth. If you don't like cubits, 13.5 by 6 feet. What does it mean? There are 2 schools of thought. Bed means bed, i.e., this is where he slept. Or bed means coffin. Or in this time period, we would have used the word sarcophagus. Either one works. Either one is historically appropriate. Either one is appropriate based on the word of that is used. You can take your pick. I don't really care which one. I like the idea that it's his coffin, just because that seems super cool that we killed this guy and the Ammonites took him and put him in an iron box. I just think that's cool. However, I know. The other school that makes a big deal about the fact that his bed is so big and made of iron is that they tend to fall on the heavy descriptors. Even if it's a coffin, you still can fall on the heavy descriptors. Or it could be how Egypt many times would put it in multiple. It also could be a reference to cursing. So I put you in a regular coffin and then I surrounded you in a box of iron. So you're really not going to come back. You're gone and we trapped you. Your spirit's not even leaving. So it could even come into that. But ultimately it comes into one of those 2 schools. Either it's his bed he sleeps in or it's his bed he sleeps in. Yes?
Since it's in this area, and that would then become Philistia, which would then have Goliath, who was very, very big.
Him being a giant is not really in question. Everybody agrees he's a giant. He is a Rephaim. Under other circumstances, he would have been called one of the Anakim. And he might even call him that in Numbers. I didn't go back and look for that particular word. He's a giant. We just don't know if he sleeps in it or he sleeps forever in it.
That's years later, and there's very few left, so they would have been, I guess in terms of these breeding with shorter people, so that this one got progressively a little bit shorter.
Yeah. But even Goliath's what, 9 feet? 9.5. So if I was going to sleep in a bed and I was 9.5, I'd be okay with a 13-foot bed, right? That seems okay. My feet don't fall off the end. I got plenty of room for my pillow, right?
But at the time he wrote this, he points out that over there is a tourist attraction or something.
Oh, yeah. You can go see it. Whether it's his bed or it's his coffin, you can go look. Yeah. Yeah, really. So they say it's according to the common cubit. That's the way that the English Standard Version chooses to render it. Literally just means the cubit of a man. So probably a Hebrew cubit, not a Og cubit. That probably could have been 6 inches or more longer. I mean, if you just put me up against a regular basketball player, I'm actually a little tall. You'd have to do, who here is 5 foot? Anybody? Okay, your arm compared to Eli's. He's not here, but we can make Blaine stand up and do it. It's pretty close, right? So it's a big discrepancy, but it's probably a Hebrew cubit. Any other thoughts? Cool. All right, let's go ahead and continue on. We're probably not finishing tonight, but we're going to get pretty close. So in verse 12, we begin the section of possessions. So 12 to 17 is the eastern tribes getting their possessions. 18 to 22 is the eastern tribes being instructed in what they're supposed to do now that they have a home. And then we end with Moses. I'm going to move pretty quick through this because if I do have time, I'm going to talk about Moses. So 12 to 17 details out all of the regions that are given to Manasseh, Gad, and Reuben. You can see them up there. Manasseh gets a half portion up here. You're going to see some maps that are going to take Manasseh all the way down to the Jabbok. So it looks more like Manasseh takes the middle part here, like it's a big bow tie or something of the nation. Here it's more described in the north, but it may ultimately get down to that point, depending on what period you're talking about. Gad, we know, gets around the Jabbok River, and then Reuben gets the south just to the north of Moab. So that's 12 through 17 there. You're welcome to read through, but I've said enough words at you. The best part about that is in verse 13 and 14, where there is an interjection. It says, all of that portion of Bashan, which is the north, is called the land of Rephaim. Jair the Manassite took it, all of the region of the Argob, that is Bashan, as far as the border of the Geshurites and so forth and so on, and he called it his own name, Havoth Jair, to this day. So he takes all of that north region up there. That's why Manasseh really gets in there. Okay, 18 through 22 is the last section we're going to talk about, where Moses simply says, I commanded you at this point. You got homes, you got wives, you got kids, and you have tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of livestock. Abandon them, and all of you men come across the Jordan with us. It takes a great amount of faith, because obviously we just killed everybody over here, but there are nations up here. There are nations down here. Ammon is just right here. You've got nations that are right over here. I mean, you got nations even down here. And you're just going to leave your wife and kids and all of your animals and just go away. For a while. But they do. Arguably, that's the most faithful portion of all of these people that come across. And then they're ultimately going to end up being upset too. So we're going to see that. Okay. Any comments before we conclude? Okay, next time we're going to finish chapter 3, and we're going to move into chapter 4 and 5. So as long as we can keep on our schedule here. So thank you very much. Have a good one.